Good evening from Los Angeles. I'm Lawrence O'Donnell. President Obama is expected to sign the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell into law on Wednesday, which passed the Senate on Saturday by a vote of 65 to 31, voting nay, in fact, leading the opposition despite an endorsement of repeal by Defense Secretary Gates and Joint Chiefs Chair Mike Mullen was former self-proclaimed Maverick Senator John McCain, who found no need for facts in his argument.
Don't think that it won't be at great cost. Harm the battle effectiveness, which is so vital to the support, to the survival of our young men and women in the military.
In 2006, McCain said that he would seriously consider the repeal of the ban on openly gay members of the military if their leadership recommended it.
The day that the leadership of the military comes to me and says, Senator, we ought to change the policy, then I think we ought to consider seriously changing it, because those leaders in the military are the ones we give the responsibility to.
It wasn't the first time McCain has turned on McCain. There was John McCain in 1989, dragged in front of the Senate Ethics Committee for his part in the Keating 5 fundraising scandal, who then became John McCain, the hero of campaign finance reform, who this year became the John McCain strangely at peace with the Supreme Court's decision to remove limits from corporate spending on political advertising.
The Supreme Court has spoken. I respect their decision.
Again and again on immigration, on the Bush tax cuts, on climate change, on the importance of bipartisanship, even on whether he's a maverick or not, McCain has turned on himself and left the rest of us to wonder, what's up with John McCain? Joining me now are Cliff Schechter, author of The Real McCain, Why Conservatives Don't Trust Him and Why Independents Shouldn't, and Anna Marie Cox, Washington correspondent for GQ magazine. So, Cliff, who is the real John McCain? Or should I say, is there a real John McCain? Or has he always just been a politician who makes convenient, self-serving choices?
Well, thanks for having me here, Lawrence. Yeah, that's what he's been. Basically, he's been someone, and I tried to argue in my book, The Real McCain in 2008, that he's someone who really often made decisions and legislated based upon anger. And vindictiveness. I mean, lately, if you see him walking around, he's so angry, he's so bitter. I sometimes feel like, you know, he's doing performance art for what an aneurysm looks like. He's so over the top. And so I look at it, you know, when I wrote my book, I looked back to what happened in 2000 when everybody was giving him credit for being a moderate. And the truth was he was so angry at the Bush team for beating him that he purposely went and disagreed with them on taxes and a patient's Bill of Rights and the environment, on things that, you know, in the past he'd agreed with them upon. And you're looking at the same thing here. I kind of warned in my book that if he lost to Obama, he was going to become this sort of nasty, angry man because he didn't believe Obama was a guy that was better than him, that should have been in the same room as him. And so you just see that playing out all the time. And so I think that's your answer to who the real McCain is. It's somebody much more motivated, sadly, by this vindictiveness and anger than someone by the greater angels, which many people thought.
Anna Marie, let's consider his maverick history. Last April, he said, I never considered myself a maverick. I consider myself a person who serves the people of Arizona to the best of his abilities. And here's how he described himself on the campaign trail in 2008.
What Maverick really means, what this team of Maverick really means, is we understand who we work for.
Anna Marie, is he not hip to the whole videotape thing? Like, we actually have this stuff and we can play it and we can put it right beside the statement where he says...
The pictures on the TV, aren't there little people inside there? Who put me inside the little machine? I don't want to make fun of him too much. I actually am probably more sympathetic to him than Cliff is. I think that, but the operative word is probably bitter more than amnesiac. I think that he tends to remember the slights that are done to him. And I think that, he's never changed his mind on an issue when it comes to things like climate change and, until recently, immigration, and also in things like normalization of relationships with Vietnam. He's never changed his mind on an issue because people have confronted him directly on it. He's always changed his mind over time in kind of a drip-drip kind of way because people around him have influenced him. The kind of people who can make those arguments to him have sort of disappeared. And so now when he's confronted with direct arguments and confronted by the same people who he used to think of as his allies, or at least co-Mavericks, or at least people that he could cross the aisle to join, I think he just digs his heels in deeper. And that's why you get things like his behavior on Don't Ask, Don't Tell and on the DREAM Act, and in fact on the START Treaty, which we haven't covered and he hasn't voted on yet, but he's really behaving in an un-McCain-like, or at least un-McCain that we thought we knew kind of way.
Cliff, Joe Klein has really turned on John McCain. Joe Klein is a very close student of politicians, of their character. He gets up close. He writes close, gets in deep. And he has said in his most recent piece on McCain, he's called him a flagrantly cynical and cowardly politician. And Joe also says, I used to know a different John McCain, the guy who proposed comprehensive immigration reform with Ted Kennedy. Was there really, right. I mean, it seems like what I'm hearing from you, Cliff, is, no, you didn't know a different John McCain. He was fooling you.
Yeah, I mean, with all respect to Joe Klein, I think his, the way he looks at him now is entirely correct. He's bitter, but he wasn't a different John McCain. He was just in a different phase. He seems to go through these different phases. People need to remember, and I'll jump off what Anne Marie was saying, which is, sometimes you don't notice he switches over time, but when he's in a battle, it's a crusade. It's a fight to the end, and it's personal. And so if he's standing on the same side of you, let's say it's campaign finance reform or immigration, he's busy calling the other side unspeakable names and saying how stupid they are and questioning their very morality. And so when he suddenly makes it to the other side, it's not like he's a guy that sort of was, in the middle and thought something somewhat. He seems to always have to be on that side, always have to be in a fight and leading against somebody. And that's where that anger and bitterness comes out. And so I think when, what Joe's talking about is back, in the early 2000s when he seemed like he was working well. He co-sponsored the Patient Bill of Rights with, John Edwards and Ted Kennedy. He co-sponsored, I think, to close the gun show loophole with Joe Lieberman. He was doing a lot of that kind of stuff. But there are ulterior motives. I mean, he was trying to jab at President Bush. And until he decided he may want to run for president again, that behavior didn't change.
And, Anna Marie, wasn't there historically an ulterior motive to his campaign finance reform crusade, since this was a senator who, as a senator, first came to national attention in the biggest fundraising scandal of his day, the Keating 5 scandal? He was in front of the Ethics Committee, had to defend himself on that, and then he does an immediate turn out of that into, gee, what cause am I going to champion now? Campaign finance reform. Wasn't that all about just cleaning his hands from the scandal he was in?
Well, let's say ulterior motives are not always a bad thing. I mean, I think that it was a correct thing for him to do, to become a campaign finance reform champion after the Keating 5 scandal. I think some of the things we're talking about, some of the changes of heart he's had, haven't necessarily been for the wrong reasons. I think the problem here with McCain is that, and I guess I just have a slightly more sympathetic view than Cliff is, that I think that he does fight from the gut. Sometimes he happens to land on the right side of things, or the side that you and I may agree with. And whatever side he's on, though, he definitely digs in his heels. And there's no such thing as a passive sort of, partisan on his part. I mean, I think
exactly.
And when it comes to Don't Ask, Don't Tell, where he went for years saying that he would take the word of the leadership of the military on this. I interviewed him on my radio show in 2009, and he said just the same thing. In fact, in 2009, he said he would be probably further ahead than Obama would be on the very same subject in terms of doing the research. When it comes right down to it, he just has to be the leader on it. And when he hasn't made up his mind, he'll go to whatever his latest thought was. And on Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it was against repeal.
Cliff Schechter and Anna Marie Cox, thank you very much for your insights tonight.